Hello, my name is Jung Ryu. I'm professor of information sciences and technology and the head of the Division of Business Engineering and Information Sciences and Technology at Penn State Altoona. Today, I'm going to talk about emergency remote teaching or ERT best practices. What do you think emergency remote teaching is? ERT refers to a temporary instructional response to an emergency. In fact, we're going through one right now, namely COVID-19. Many of us are stressed out about it and trying to figure out how to maintain quality despite the abrupt changes we have to make in our teaching modes. That is, going from face-to-face to remote or mixed, just to name a few. We often get confused between online teaching and ERT. I would say that the biggest difference is that we have time to plan and prepare for online teaching, but there is no such luxury for ERT because of its temporary nature. Coming up next is an excerpt from my recent talk on ERT best practices. Enjoy. There are some unique challenges associated with ERT. Just to name a few, I just mentioned this, lack of prep time, lots of uncertainties because we don't know what's going to happen. We were just talking about this earlier, whether this is going to last until next year or whether it's going to be over after Thanksgiving. Nobody knows. And lots of resource challenges, time, budget, and so on. And I've heard a lot from our fellow faculty members regarding the difficulty associated with engagement and also communication challenges. And in particular, I heard that a lot of people are going through tough times, especially with respect to academic integrity challenges. So in this case, we all know AI violations mean cheating among students. So before I move further, do you have any thoughts about other challenges than the ones I just presented? Just curious. I want to get your input a little bit here. Somebody just muted. Another thing we can do is we can discuss this more during our Q&A session, but keep this thought in mind because we're going to talk about this, I guess, a little bit more. So I thought about this and I came up with this question, what can we control as teachers out of all those challenges? Because, budget challenges, maybe that's really up to the administration. There isn't really too much we can do about it, maybe. Comes to resources, once again, it's sort of above our pay grade. But there are these things we can control, including things like how we engage our students, how to more effectively communicate with our students, and finally, dealing with some of these academic integrity violations. Before I get into all the details about how we can address some of those challenges, I'd like to lay a little bit of a foundation by giving you a disclaimer. So I want to say that there's no silver bullet. So what I mean by this is there's no perfect solution out there, and whatever solution we come up with will have some weaknesses and its own challenges. Another thing I want to mention is cultivating and demonstrating this genuine caring for our students really is key to our success. So I want to really make this very clear because all these techniques and tools out there, they're helpful, but if we don't keep this in our mind all the time, I think they're bound to fail. So let's talk about engagement a little bit. And I thought about this scenario where a teacher, a professor, doesn't show up for 1 week or 2 weeks at all in an in-person class. Students will definitely feel lost and they'll call the department head and there'll be all kinds of complaints. But something like that can also happen in these online environments, but the responses are slightly probably different. Even if the professor's gone for a week, maybe nobody's complaining too much. But I think we have to treat our online classes or remote teaching just like what we do in face-to-face classes. So to really promote engagement, I think we have to be present and we have to be this person, a community organizer or facilitator, so that we can build this community of learning among students. So I really feel that this is really our role, and it's beginning to be more that way. And I added some tips here. I mean, all of these are pretty much no-brainers, and I'm sure a lot of these you already practice. But I guess the key here is really staying in touch with our students. Because I'm an IT person, I cannot skip talking about technologies, and I mean, all of you are a Zoom users, and one thing I want to mention is that there are some of these hidden features in Zoom you may not be aware of. And I would like to mention that just for you to make your classes more interactive, you could be using something like breakout sessions and so on. And I'm sure a lot of you are already using it. I know that a lot of us also had maybe some embarrassing moments. So just to share my experience, the other day I was in this meeting attended by maybe like hundreds of people, and I thought I disabled my video, but I was brushing my teeth. So like 400 people saw me brushing my teeth. So that's really bad. So I think this kind of Zoom etiquette among students, reminding them and also be mindful of these types of things ourselves is really important. And if you want to take it to the next level, you could be using something like Microsoft Teams, especially when you try to encourage your students to collaborate. And then if you really want to push your students, you could be using something like Mural. I don't know, some of you may be familiar with the tool to help them collaborate and brainstorm to create some new knowledge and so on. So I have the website here. You can check it out later. The next challenge I want to address is communication. And it's almost like checking the checking the pulse of a person. In this case, I guess this person is an embodiment of our students. And unless we constantly check whether they are really live and about in terms of their learning, we may lose them very easily and quickly. And there are many different ways to do this these days. I mean, luckily we have emails, texting, surveys, all these different ways of keeping in touch with our students, staying in touch with our students. But I guess once again, the key here is we try to use the mode preferred by our students. And if nobody's checking their emails and we just keep sending emails, I guess that doesn't make any sense. Some technology tips I have for you in this case is this choice between mobile apps and desktop applications. And these days, a lot of our students seem to prefer mobile apps rather than desktop applications, and they install all these apps on their phones and they want to use their phones to take notes and so on. So probably that's one consideration you could have. And another tip I have is using probably multiple modes of communication when you're trying to reach out to your students, because that provides us with some kind of, I guess, redundancies. Let's say email fails. If I know their phone number, I can call them. If that fails, maybe I'm connected to them through some sort of a social media tool. maybe something like LinkedIn, and you will be able to get in touch with them eventually. And then the last point I want to make here is the importance of meeting students at their level. I mean, these days, students prefer, of course, videos using emojis and those types of things. And when we try to use what they're using, we're really expressing our empathy towards our students. So in that sense, just being at their level says a lot about how much we care about our students. And the final challenge I want to talk about here is academic integrity violations. And of course, the very first thing we should be doing is educating our students about the importance of academic integrity and, I mean, don't plagiarize and all those good, types of instructions we can give to our students. But another tool we have is this thing called code of conduct, especially in the university environment. And if students violate these, they get in trouble. So they should refrain from, doing academic integrity violations. And finally, maybe being more strategic about how you give assessment to your students instead of giving them these big stake assessments like midterm exams or final exams. Maybe you want to break it down into smaller quizzes which are lower stakes so that students are not really too much compelled to cheat. So that's another technique. And some technology considerations for academic integrity violations. I mean, I know you're already doing a bunch of these things, but let me just mention it again. Question banks, of course. You can randomly generate the questions. You can randomize your answers. And there are a lot of these commercial proctoring services out there. So if you can afford to use those services, that's even better. But once again, these are not perfect solutions. So a lot of these things I'm talking about are common sense things and mainly to provoke our thoughts during our Q&A sessions. So please bear with me. In order to address all these challenges, of course, you need to have some technology literacy because the more tools you're able to use, probably the better. But what's more fundamental or foundational here, I would say, is having compassion as an educator. And I'm sure all of you have lots of compassion for your students. And also being mindful about the use of these tools and techniques and strategies effectively all the time because you tend to forget, and I tend to forget, unless I keep reminding myself of what is possible versus what I'm just doing without thinking too much. So in that sense, being conscientious, being continuous, I mean, being consistent, I guess, and then intentional about all these strategies and techniques is really the key here. So this is sort of an advertisement for our project, but I'm part of this project called ERT in STEM project. And one of the goals of our project is to document and share these creative ERT solutions already probably used by faculty members out there, including some of you, and network these people so that we can develop even better solutions and ideas. So in conclusion, once again, the bottom line is really, I think, this compassion and care we have about our students, and whatever we have other than these, I think, is just something extra, mere tools we can use to make things better in terms of what we're doing. And I want to also finish my talk by saying that, your compassion and care can make a huge difference. And that actually happened to me as a high school student because I was this average high school student struggling, and my English teacher, kept asking me to do things in classes, and eventually that led to me coming to the U.S. and finally becoming, a college professor. So, I mean, your little act can make a huge difference. And I just want to reiterate the importance of being mindful and being proactive. And If you have any questions after the talk is over, here is my contact information, our project website.